Hey guys, tonight we're going to step a little further back than usual, way back, before bedtime stories, before cities, before people. Tonight we're going to drift into the dark silence before the first heartbeat of life itself, the long, slow prequel to everything you've ever known. If that sounds dramatic, that's because it is, but don't worry, we'll take it slow. Before you sink into the covers, take a second to like the video if you actually enjoy these long, sleepy dives into the weird corners of history and science. Leave a comment to tell me where you're listening from, or if you've ever found yourself lying awake at night wondering, how did any of this begin? Now dim the lights, find that perfect spot where the blanket hits just right, and let's start, not at the dawn of time, but just before the idea of dawn existed at all. Before you, before people, before even the idea of before. There was dust. Not poetic dust, not the kind that catches sunlight in your living room, but cosmic dust. Ancient, drifting, indifferent. The leftovers of exploded stars, scattered through a dark so deep that even darkness seemed to give up trying. The universe was still young then, but already old enough to feel tired. Out there, gravity, quiet, relentless gravity, began its slow work. It gathered bits of that dust together, pulling and pressing, until the pressure got so intense that rock melted and space itself began to glow. That was Earth's birth. Not with a bang, but with a long, molten sigh. The baby planet spun, steaming and half-formed, choked by gases that could kill you in one breath. The air shimmered with carbon dioxide, methane and ammonia, a cocktail so foul it would make a volcano blush. Meteors rained down like fireworks at the end of the world, except there wasn't a world yet to end. And yet somehow, amid the chaos, the planet began to cool. Slowly, painfully, like a fever breaking after an eternity of heat. The molten crust hardened into continents. The first oceans condensed from steam, hissing and boiling as they met the still, hot rock. It wasn't a gentle transformation, more like the universe learning how to cook and getting it wrong about 50 billion times before figuring out the recipe for habitable. For a long time, the Earth was just quiet. Not peaceful, exactly. There were still volcanoes coughing up gas and comets dropping in uninvited, but the kind of quiet that hums under everything. The kind that feels like a pause between heartbeats. It's funny to think that in that silence, in that poisoned water, something tiny and impossible was already starting to stir. They say life began in the ocean, but that's a little misleading. The ocean back then wasn't exactly the turquoise postcard version. It was thick, acidic, and dark, filled with metal ions and heat from underwater vents. But chemistry, as it turns out, is more imaginative than we give it credit for. Somewhere, maybe in a warm tidal pool, maybe deep beneath the waves, a few simple molecules started linking together in ways they weren't supposed to. They copied themselves, made mistakes, and then copied the mistakes too. And just like that, life happened. No divine lightning bolt, no trumpet sound, no cosmic applause, just molecules getting curious. Those early forms of life were microscopic, invisible even if you had eyes back then. They drifted through the water, absorbing, dividing, mutating. Each one was a small gamble against extinction, and most of them lost. But a few didn't. A few learned to harness sunlight or heat or minerals from the deep. And over time, those few turned the whole planet into something alive. Imagine that. The air you breathe, the skin you live in, the thoughts in your head, all trace back to that single, stubborn moment when chemistry decided to keep trying. For billions of years, that was it. No plants, no animals, no movement visible to the naked eye, just oceans full of invisible life, quietly rearranging the chemistry of the planet. They began releasing oxygen, a deadly poison at first, one that killed almost everything alive at the time. But eventually oxygen became the foundation for everything to come. It's almost poetic. The first extinction created the conditions for new life to thrive. A brutal but efficient system. The universe never wastes an ending. Above those oceans, lightning still flickered across the sky. Volcanoes belched smoke. The moon tugged on tides, carving rhythm into an otherwise chaotic world. Days and nights began to matter, slowly forming the concept of time that life could grow around. The earth, once hostile, was starting to breathe. If you could stand there, if you could somehow exist without lungs or fear, and watch this new world form, it wouldn't feel like creation. It would feel like patience. Everything was happening in the slowest motion imaginable. Continents shifted, seas rose and fell, ice spread, melted, and spread again. Every mistake, every mutation, every failed attempt at existence was part of a long, quiet conversation between matter and time. Evolution doesn't rush, it doesn't apologize, it just continues. And that's the strange comfort of it, isn't it? You and I, our entire species, are just the most recent whisper in that endless dialogue. The Earth didn't make us special, it just made us possible. Somewhere in those early seas, a few single-celled organisms began to team up. They merged, cooperated, and formed complex cells, the kind that could eventually become plants, animals, or you. It's one of the most radical things that's ever happened. Life learning to share. That cooperation set everything in motion. From that moment on, evolution wasn't just survival of the fittest, it was survival of the most adaptable. The ones who could change, endure, and find new ways to keep the story going. You could call it luck, or chaos, or divine design, but either way the point is the same. The universe had rolled the dice and Earth had come up with life. It wasn't beautiful yet, but it was inevitable. The world's still young, the oceans alive with invisible possibility. No trees, no birds, no humans. Just the hum of existence beneath waves, waiting. The oceans simmer, thick and murky like soup, left to boil too long. Lightning lashes the surface, splitting clouds that never stop growling. In that chaos, somewhere beneath the steam and ash, chemistry starts getting ambitious. It begins as a whisper between molecules, just carbon chatting with hydrogen, a few stray bits of nitrogen joining in, an accidental meeting that should have ended in silence. But something strange happens. They start sticking together. Patterns emerge, loops of reaction, tiny self-replicating spirals that have no business existing, yet insist on doing so anyway. No one's watching, but if they were, they'd see the smallest rebellion in the history of the universe. Matter learning how to want. It's not consciousness, not even close, but it's a start. These first molecular misfits copy themselves, stumble, make mistakes, and then copy the mistakes too. They are clumsy, inconsistent, and absurdly determined. Every so often one changes just enough to survive a little longer, and that tiny difference is everything. This is not creation with purpose. It's creation by accident through persistence. There's no spark of divine light, no grand architect, just heat, minerals, and time conspiring to make something that can almost be called alive. The sea becomes a restless cauldron, thick with potential. Sulfur hisses from volcanic vents. Iron sizzles in the deep, and the water takes on that peculiar metallic tang that smells faintly of both death and possibility. The microbes drifting there are blind, mindless, and miraculous. Each one is a microscopic pioneer, testing out the mechanics of existence. They absorb, divide, and multiply. Slowly, invisibly, relentlessly. They gossip their chemical secrets through replication, the first conversation in history. They do not know it, but they are building everything. For millions of years, the world belongs to them. Not dinosaurs, not mammals, not humans, just these single cells floating through primordial seas, turning sunlight and minerals into sustenance. They transform poison into breath, chaos into pattern, and in doing so they change the entire planet. The air starts to shift. Oxygen, rare and dangerous gas, begins leaking into the atmosphere. For most of life at that time, it's a death sentence. Oxygen is corrosive, violent, and unforgiving. The oceans become toxic to the very microbes that created it. They die by the trillions, poisoning themselves in their own success. But a few endure, a few adapt, and those few will give rise to everything that crawls, swims, or sings. The world enters what might be the quietest apocalypse ever. No fire, no impact, just chemistry taking a sharp evolutionary turn. Oxygen builds up, skies clear, and the planet starts to glow blue for the first time. The Earth finally exhales, and the air becomes breathable. For the descendants, still millions of years away. It's strange to think about how every breath you take is borrowed from that ancient catastrophe. Beneath the waves, the surviving microbes continue their work. Some learn to harness light more efficiently, perfecting photosynthesis. Others burrow into the darkness near thermal vents, feeding off the Earth's own heat. Evolution isn't just survival, it's improvisation. And these little architects are jazz musicians with eternity to practice. They trade genes, merge bodies, and occasionally just absorb each other for fun or advantage. It's not war exactly, more like aggressive networking. One day, a cell swallows another and doesn't digest it. Instead, the two begin to cooperate. The swallowed cell becomes an energy factory, and together they thrive. It's the first recorded instance of teamwork in nature, and it changes everything. That act of microbial diplomacy creates complex cells, the kind that can form muscles, nerves, or brains someday. From that quiet merger, evolution gets creative. The seas fill with microscopic life in every possible shape. Spirals, rods, filaments, and orbs. A living confetti of possibility. They form mats, colonies, and slippery carpets that blanket the seafloor. They exhale, excrete, and multiply until the entire planet smells faintly of salt and sulfur and ambition. If you were to dip a hand into that ancient ocean and somehow not melt it off, you'd touch history in its most basic form. Every drop holds billions of ancestors to be, the slow architects of all future complexity. Still, the world above remains empty. No trees, no birds, no whispers of civilization. Just waves rolling endlessly under a young alien sky. Lightning flashes, the earth hums, and deep in the dark water, cells divide again and again, rewriting the script of existence without ever knowing they're doing it. Over time, some microbes begin clumping together, forming colonies that behave like a single organism. It's a small shift, but it might be the most important one of all. Together, they can do more than alone. One absorbs nutrients, another moves, another senses light. It's not individuality that drives them. It's the opposite of the first faint outlines of community. Cooperation becomes evolution's favorite trick. Soon, these colonies begin to specialize. A few cells sacrifice themselves for the good of the whole, giving rise to tissues, then organs, then the complex choreography of life as we know it. The ocean, once silent, becomes a whispering web of connections, invisible, patient, and unstoppable. Eons pass. Continents drift. Ice comes and goes, but life endures. Each extinction, each cataclysm, each near failure leaves behind a handful of survivors who carry the world forward. That is the rhythm of existence, destruction and persistence, dancing in a loop. The earth keeps testing life, and life keeps saying, again. Eventually, in some forgotten corner of a shallow sea, the first multicellular creature takes shape. It's soft, fragile and utterly unremarkable by modern standards, more jelly than animal. But it moves, not by accident, but by design. For the first time, life chooses direction. It pulses through the water, propelled by tiny filaments, searching not for meaning, but for sustenance. It grazes, it grows, it divides again. In that motion lies everything to come, the instinct to move, to seek, to survive. It doesn't know it yet, but this is the first step on the long, winding path that will someday lead to you. The sky outside is different now. The sun burns cleaner. The oceans shimmer with light that wasn't there before. The air smells faintly less like sulfur, more like rain. The planet is softening, healing, maturing. And beneath those calm waves, life is busy inventing the future. Each mutation, each microscopic accident is another note in the slow symphony of evolution. You wouldn't see it happening, even if you watched. For 1,000 lifetimes, the changes would look like nothing. But give it enough time, and those invisible creatures will become coral, worms, trilobites, lizards, and eventually you, blinking in the dark, wondering how it all began. It's strange comfort, isn't it? Knowing that the entire story of life started with something that didn't even know it was alive. The universe didn't need purpose. It only needed patience. And patience, as it turns out, is what life does best. The oceans have found their rhythm now. A steady breathing, a pulse that syncs with the turning of the planet. For hundreds of millions of years, the waves are the only home that matters. Everything that lives, dreams, or dies does so beneath the surface. The land is still barren, just naked rock, sand, and the occasional puddle steaming under a sun that doesn't yet know how to be kind. But below, where the light filters into green-gold haze, the stage is alive. Evolution has gone from quiet practice to full performance. After billions of years spent on chemistry and cell division, life finally starts to look like life. The seas fill with creatures strange enough to make your imagination flinch. Soft, armored, glowing, spiked, and tentacled in every possible configuration. Some drift, some crawl, some swim with purpose, and all of them are hungry. It's not a gentle world. The first ecosystems are experiments in appetite. For every creature that invents movement, another invents how to catch it. For every shell, there's a jaw strong enough to crack it open. Evolution, ever the artist, now paints in sharp edges and quick reflexes. On the sea floor, trilobites scuttle like armored beetles, their bodies rippling with jointed plates. They are the wanderers of prehistory, curious, cautious, and astonishingly successful. For almost 300 million years, they will rule the ocean floor. You could walk across a Cambrian seabed if you could walk underwater, and every step would crunch softly with their shells. They feed, molt, and migrate in endless patterns like living clockwork. Some burrow into the silt, others roll into tiny balls when threatened, a trick that will one day inspire pillbugs on land. Their glassy eyes, among the first complex lenses nature ever made, watch the world with quiet suspicion. They don't know it, but they are pioneers of design. Every modern creature with a joint, a segment, or an exoskeleton owes them thanks. Above them, the water churns with motion. Something is always eating, something is always running away. Life, after all, has discovered the thrill of pursuit. Some creatures are elegant, translucent ribbons that drift like ghosts through the current. Others resemble nightmares made of armor and spines. There are predators shaped like torpedoes with fins that slice the water and mouths full of serrated plates. There are grazers who sweep the seafloor, inhaling clouds of plankton like underwater vacuum cleaners. And there are the weird ones, the ones that seem built by committee, each part borrowed from a different idea. One has 5 eyes and a feeding claw that unfolds like a trap. Another has armor so thick it moves like a slow-moving tank. Another looks like a floating leaf, perfectly camouflaged until it doesn't need to be. This is evolution at its most chaotic and creative. There are no rules, no blueprints, just endless trial and error. Each mutation is a roll of the dice, and the dice never stop rolling. Time moves differently here. Millions of years pass like heartbeats. Species appear, flourish, vanish. Whole families of creatures live their entire history between one tectonic shrug of the continents and the next. The ocean itself changes color, green to blue to murky brown, depending on what kind of life dominates it. Oxygen levels rise and fall like tides on a planetary scale. Sometimes the water chokes itself with bloom and death. Sometimes it clears, inviting light deeper and deeper until coral-like structures begin to rise. This is where ecosystems begin to take shape. Real, tangled food webs of predator and prey, builder and breaker. Balance, fragile and ever-shifting, becomes the new rule. For the first time, the planet feels busy, not with thought, but with motion. There's no peace in this ancient sea, but there is beauty. Coral forests shimmer in the shallows, delicate as lace and twice as deadly. Strange fish drift between them, fins trailing like silk ribbons. In the deep, darkness reigns. There, creatures glow in colors no human eye was ever meant to see. Neon blues, pulsing reds, a galaxy turned inward. They light their bodies to lure prey, to communicate, or simply because they can. Bioluminescence, life making light in a place the sun forgot. The deep becomes a theater of quiet miracles. Jelly-like beings pulse softly in the dark, trailing filaments that flash like lightning. Transparent hunters open invisible jaws. Worms wave in hydrothermal plumes that could boil a human in seconds, feeding on minerals and bacteria that thrive where life should not exist at all. Down here, evolution whispers, try everything. And so it does. Over countless millennia, fins refine, eyes sharpen, and jaws become precision instruments. The simple ripples of early motion evolve into the first true swimmers. Coordinated, streamlined, graceful, the sea turns into a ballet of power and patience, each creature adapted to a niche so specific it seems designed. But nothing stays dominant for long. For every perfect predator, evolution creates a better escape artist. For every armored survivor, time eventually finds a crack in the shell. The trilobites thrive, then falter. Others rise, fish-like forms with bony plates and mouths that hinge like doors. They bite, they chase, they devour. The rules of the game are simple: eat, avoid being eaten, and multiply before someone else figures out how to do it better. Yet even in this ruthless economy of existence, beauty persists. Scales catch the light like liquid silver. Tentacles bloom like flowers in slow motion. Even the act of predation, brutal as it is, becomes strangely elegant. A choreography honed by survival itself. Every now and then, catastrophe strikes. A drop in oxygen, a shift in climate, a volcanic cough that clouds the sky for 1,000,000 years. The oceans darken, the balance breaks, and species vanish as easily as they appeared. But life never quits. It simply waits, reshapes, begins again. In every empty niche, something new stirs. That is the quiet secret of evolution, its resilience. Death is not an ending here. It's an invitation for something else to try. And so, from the debris of the old, the new always rises. Sometimes smaller, sometimes stranger, always more prepared. By now, the sea is a living archive. Every creature, every scale and spine is a record of experiment. you could read the story of Earth in their forms, or the way a jaw fits, the curve of a fin, the symmetry of a shell. They are notes in a melody that will one day crescendo into the complexity of land animals, feathers, and human hands. But that's far in the future. For now, the oceans are still home. The continents remain quiet, barren, patient. But near the coasts, something is stirring. A few creatures, bold or foolish, venture closer to the shallows. They gulp at air trapped in tide pools, testing a new way to breathe. They drag themselves along the sand, fins flexing against gravity, their eyes blinking above water for the first time. They don't know it yet, but they are rehearsing for an exodus. The oceans have carried life as far as they can. Soon the stage will widen. Soon the blue will give way to green. And the world, at last, will learn how to walk. For eons the sea had been everything, the cradle, the cathedral, the stage. But nothing in nature stays still for long. Even in the deepest currents, evolution is restless, always pushing, always asking, what if? And one day, something small answers that question. It happens near the edges, where waves lap against muddy shores, and the tide leaves shallow pools steaming under a hot, pale sun. Here, the water grows fickle, sometimes too warm, sometimes too shallow. Fish that once cruised effortlessly through open seas find themselves trapped in shrinking puddles. Gills flare, desperate. The air above shimmers, heavy with heat. To survive, they do something unthinkable. They gulp. The first breath isn't elegant. It's awkward, inefficient, a cough more than a breath. But it works. Just enough to keep them alive until the next tide. That tiny gasp, half accident, half miracle, will change the planet forever. The ones that survive the longest begin to develop crude lungs, little sacs branching from their guts, capturing air when the ocean abandons them. Fins stiffen into paddles, jointed and curious. These creatures begin to push against the mud, dragging themselves from one pool to another, leaving faint, wet impressions behind. Each push is a small rebellion against gravity. Each breath is defiance. And defiance in nature is where progress hides. The shoreline becomes a frontier. Not quite sea, not quite land, but something in between. Here, amphibious pioneers flop and heave their way into a new kind of existence. They don't know it, but they are the first to test the world above water, a world full of sunlight, oxygen, and danger. The air burns their skin. Their eyes, once tuned to the murky light of the ocean, squint at brightness. The weight of their own bodies feels alien, and yet they persist, because evolution, in all its slow genius, never wastes an opportunity. Plants had already started the invasion. Before any animal dared to crawl ashore, the rocks and mud had turned green. Tiny algae crept inland, weaving carpets of damp moss. Then came taller, stronger plants, stems that could hold their own weight, roots that anchored them against wind. In the silence of this early landscape, they began to build forests. Primitive ferns unfurled under strange skies. Spore clouds drifted like soft green smoke. Insects followed, wingless at first, scuttling through the underbrush, nibbling on leaves. Then wings emerged, delicate and new, and the air filled with the faint buzz of creatures that had discovered the joy of flight. The earth, once barren and brown, turned lush and restless. Where there was only rock, now there was shade. Where there was silence, now there was sound. The rustle of leaves, the hum of wings, the soft slap of something learning to walk. The pioneers of this new world, creatures like Tiktaalik, Acanthostega, and ichthyostega were caught in transition. Not quite fish, not yet amphibian. They had scales and gills, but also necks and digits. They could push themselves forward, clumsy but determined, their fins bending into the rough draft of legs. Imagine one of them, half in water, half on land. Its skin glistens under sunlight. Its body trembles with effort. It takes a few uncertain breaths, its eyes scanning a horizon no fish has ever seen. Behind it, the ocean. Safe, familiar, eternal. Ahead, the unknown. It hesitates, then moves forward. That single motion, that simple decision, becomes the birth of every future step. Of course, nature doesn't change her rules easily. Most of these bold wanderers die quickly, dried out by heat, suffocated by air, crushed under their own weight. The early land is no paradise. There's no soft soil yet, no gentle rain, no comfortable shade. The air tastes strange, the ground is rough, and predators lurk both in water and at the edge of the tide. But failure in evolution isn't waste, it's instruction. Every death writes a note, and every survivor reads it. Gradually the body learns. Lungs strengthen, skin thickens, limbs grow bones that can bear weight. Eyes adjust to daylight, and hearts, once meant to pump through water, learn the rhythm of dry air. The result? The first true amphibians, living bridges between two worlds. They spend their days near the water, sunning themselves on rocks, returning to the shallows to lay their eggs. The land is still dangerous, but it offers something irresistible: space, room to grow, to explore, to evolve. The continents bloom with green life. Forests expand, swallowing entire coastlines. Insects the size of dinner plates crawl across the earth, their wings glittering like glass. Giant dragonflies patrol the humid skies, and centipedes longer than a man slither through leaf litter. Oxygen levels soar. The air becomes rich and heavy, almost sweet. Breathing feels easier, growth comes faster, and life explodes in every direction. The planet hums with possibility. Amphibians turn into explorers, venturing farther inland. Their children spend less time in water, their skin grows drier, and their lungs stronger. One branch begins to stay on land for good, and from them the first reptiles are born. They are nature's next experiment, creatures no longer tied to the sea. Their eggs, sealed against drying out, can survive anywhere. Their scales shimmer in sunlight, protecting them from heat. And for the first time, life doesn't have to return to the water to begin again. The leash is cut. This moment, quiet, unnoticed, unrecorded, changes everything. The ocean, for all its vastness, was a closed system. Land, by contrast, is chaos. Every direction is open, every environment is a challenge waiting to be solved. From these small, scaly ancestors will come dinosaurs, birds, and mammals. From these early steps in the mud will come running, climbing, digging, flying. From that first awkward breath will come a voice that tells stories about it. But right now the world is still young. The forests hum with life, the air buzzes with insects, and the ground trembles with the footfalls of creatures trying to find their balance. Night falls over the swampy coasts, and the air glows faintly green with spores and fireflies. The first amphibians rest half-submerged, eyes just above the surface, listening to the strange sounds of this new world. Wind through leaves, rain on moss, thunder over distant hills. They are far from the sea that birthed them, but they carry its memory in every cell. Salt still runs in their blood, their hearts still echo the tides. The leap to land was not a single moment. It was a million tiny choices, each one a whisper of survival, a dare to live differently. And as the planet darkens under its canopy of ferns and towering trees, evolution smiles. Because the experiment worked, life has learned to walk. The world is ready for a spectacle. Forests stretch from pole to pole, thick with ferns and towering conifers. Rivers twist through steaming valleys, and the air hums with the sound of insects that never learned moderation. The land, once a timid experiment, is now overflowing with life. Bold, loud, and unashamed of its excess. And then, from the underbrush, the giants arrive. They do not tiptoe, they thunder. The earth quakes beneath their steps as evolution, drunk on ambition, unveils its most extravagant creations. Scaled colossi rise beneath the sun, teeth like daggers, tails like whips, and hearts that beat in time with the turning of the planet. This is the age of giants, the reign of the dinosaurs. It begins quietly, as all revolutions do. From the survivors of the great Permian extinction, the single worst catastrophe in Earth's history, a new kind of reptile crawls from the rubble. The planet, still scarred and smoking, slowly rebuilds itself. The air clears. The oceans fill again. Plants creep back across the wastelands. And in the recovering silence, the dinosaurs take their first breath. They start small, little two-legged scavengers darting through the ferns, quick and clever, but evolution rewards audacity. Within a few million years, they stretch, grow, and diversify until they dominate every corner of the map. The Earth's continents, once one vast landmass called Pangaea, begin to drift apart like slow, ancient icebergs. As they do, climates shift and life adapts. In the north, deserts bloom. In the south, jungles thrive. Each region becomes its own stage, and dinosaurs fill every role imaginable: predator, prey, wanderer, ruler, dream. The plant-eaters arrive first in force, herds of gentle titans grazing across endless plains of cycads and ferns. Diplodocus, Brachiosaurus, Apatosaurus. Their names sound like spells, heavy with awe. Necks stretch toward the clouds, tails sweep through ferns like pendulums of flesh and bone. Their footsteps shake the ground in deep, rolling rhythms like the heartbeat of an ancient drum. Above them, the predators follow. Allosaurus, Ceratosaurus, Megalosaurus, sleek, calculating, and hungry. They stalk through forests dense with mist, their breath rising like steam. They move with the grace of dancers and the precision of machines, built not for cruelty but for balance. Every hunter makes the grazers sharper, faster, tougher. Every chase is a lesson, every death feeds the cycle. It's not chaos, it's choreography, a violent, magnificent harmony written in claw and bone. The world during their reign is nothing like ours. The air is thick, the oxygen heavy, the skies often red with volcanic dust. Mountains rise from magma, only to be ground down by rain and time. Seas swell with ammonites and giant reptiles that glide like shadows beneath the waves. And above all this chaos, another experiment takes flight. Tiny feathered creatures, descendants of small tree-dwelling dinosaurs, begin to leap from branch to branch. Scales give way to down, arms to wings. They glide first, then soar, riding the warm air rising from the forests. Birds are born in the quiet moments between roars. One of evolution's greatest jokes, a creature born of thunder that learns to sing. But for every age that rises, another waits in the wings to fall. The dinosaurs do not suspect it, but the earth is already shifting beneath them. The continents continue to drift, changing ocean currents and climates. Volcanoes belch gas into the atmosphere, and the world begins to cool, then heat, then cool again. Life adjusts, as it always does. Some species thrive in the changes, others fade, but none of them could ever prepare for what's coming, because in the endless dark of space, a rock is on its way. 66 million years ago, a piece of cosmic debris, 6 miles wide and utterly indifferent, slams into the coast of what will one day be Mexico. In an instant, the world changes. The blast is brighter than 1,000 suns. The shockwave levels forests for hundreds of miles. Tsunamis rise taller than mountains. Within minutes, the skies turn to fire. Every living thing that can run flies. Every living thing that can hide burrows. But there's nowhere to run from the sky. Ash and soot blot out the sun. Days become twilight. Then darkness. The earth cools, plants die, the food chain collapses. The age of giants ends not with a roar, but with a long, choking silence. When light finally returns, the world is unrecognizable. The great reptiles are gone, their bones buried beneath layers of ash and time. Only a few small survivors remain: birds, turtles, crocodiles, and a scattered handful of creatures that once skittered in the shadows. Mammals. For millions of years, those mammals had lived quiet, cautious lives under the rule of dinosaurs. Tiny, nocturnal, soft, and clever. They survived by staying small and hidden. Now, for the first time, the world is theirs. They emerge from the underbrush into a planet reborn from fire. The forests grow back. The air clears, rivers carve new paths through ash. And under the sun, fur replaces scales as the next great experiment begins. The giants are gone, but their echo remains. In every bird that takes flight, in every reptile that basks on a warm stone, and in every bone that dreams of standing tall. The story of the dinosaurs is not just one of dominance. It's a reminder that even the most powerful creatures are only renting their time, that nature builds empires only to reclaim them. That extinction isn't an end, it's a reset. From their bones, the earth learns how to grow again. From their downfall, mammals rise. From their silence, a new sound begins to stir. Softer, higher, curious. A heartbeat under fur, a spark behind eyes, something beginning to think, to wonder, to reach. The age of giants has ended, but something even stranger is on its way. When the smoke clears, the world is quiet. The great thunder lizards are gone, their echoes fading into the soft hiss of rain falling on ash. The forests are blackened, the air sharp with the smell of burnt earth. For a while, nothing stirs except the wind and the patient drip of cooling stone. And then something moves, tiny, soft-furred, unremarkable to look at, a survivor. The age of giants has ended, but life, stubborn as ever, refuses to quit. They were here all along, hiding in burrows, in roots, in the folds of fallen trees. Small, cautious, and clever, the mammals. They had watched the dinosaurs rule the world, had scurried under their feet, and waited. Now, with the sky cleared and the forests reborn, they emerge blinking into the sunlight, inheritors of a quiet apocalypse. What begins as survival soon becomes ambition. Mammals experiment, adapt, and expand with the restless creativity of a world starting over. Some take to the trees, some to the rivers, others to the open plain. Their bodies change with every generation. Fur thickens, teeth sharpen, tails lengthen, senses sharpen. Evolution starts doodling again, this time with more confidence. The rules have changed. The giants are gone, and the little ones are ready to make noise. At first, the mammals remain small, mouse-sized, shrew-shaped, and perpetually hungry. But in this emptier, cooler world, their talents shine. They're warm-blooded, meaning they can move at night, in cold, in chaos. They eat almost anything: seeds, bugs, roots, even each other if it comes to that. Adaptability becomes their superpower. Where dinosaurs once towered, mammals scurry and multiply, filling every niche the giants left behind. On land, they grow fur and claws. In water, some rediscover the rhythm of the sea. Others glide, climb, dig, or sprint, each species trying on a new costume in the grand theatre of life. The Paleocene and Eocene epochs become a fever dream of experimentation. Evolution runs wild, like a child with too much time and a box full of crayons. Some mammals grow armor plates, turning themselves into living tanks. Others shrink into nimble insect eaters, eyes wide and twitching, always listening for trouble. There are tree dwellers, branch leapers, and gliders that spread their limbs to catch the air like little furry kites. Then there are the ocean wanderers. Whales begin as land animals, hoofed creatures that walk into the waves and simply never come back. Over millions of years, their legs become fins, their nostrils migrate to the tops of their heads, and their bodies grow vast and streamlined. They trade solid ground for open water and silence. From timid shore dwellers, they become titans of the deep, the largest animals the world has ever known. Mammals are no longer just surviving, they are reinventing life itself. But one group in particular takes to the trees. In a world covered in forests, they find safety and opportunity among the branches. These are the primates, the early cousins of us all. They start small and wide-eyed, with grasping hands and curious minds. Life in the trees demands agility and perception. The better you can judge distance, the less likely you are to plummet to your death. So vision improves. Hands become more precise. Fingers learn to grasp, not just climb. And in the quiet canopy, something else begins to grow. Awareness, not the raw instinct of survival, but the flicker of recognition, of self, of others, of possibility. Primates learn social bonds. They groom, play, and cooperate. They begin to communicate, not with words yet, but with calls and gestures that hint at thought. The first whispers of empathy appear, a dangerous and powerful evolutionary tool. Below, on the ground, the world itself continues to shift. Continents drift farther apart, climates cool, and forests thin. The once lush jungles give way to grasslands, and new predators rise to challenge the mammals' growing dominance. Big cats, wolves, and bears stalk the plains. Elephants, rhinoceroses, and horses thunder across them. The earth, now greener and more temperate, becomes a stage for speed, muscle, and cunning. Mammals rise to the challenge, brains grow larger, reflexes sharpen, parenting becomes more attentive, social groups more complex. Unlike reptiles, who often abandon their eggs and move on, mammals nurture their young, protecting and teaching them. Every lesson passed down becomes an investment in the future. Every generation starts a little smarter, a little braver. They are building not just bodies, but minds. Time, as always, rolls forward. 50 million years pass. Then another 10. The dinosaurs are fossils now, stories written in stone. Mammals roam every continent, from the frozen tundra to the humid swamps. Some have grown into giants of their own, mammoths, mastodons, and saber-toothed cats. But among the trees of Africa, one particular branch of the mammalian family is quietly rewriting the rules again. These are the apes, descendants of primates who took thinking and turned it into an art form. They live in tight groups, form hierarchies, and begin to use simple tools. Sticks to fish for termites, leaves to gather water, stones to crack nuts. Curiosity becomes habit. Habit becomes intelligence. The rise of mammals is not a single moment of triumph. It's a slow, persistent wave, millions of tiny victories, each built on the bones of the last. They do not dominate by size or speed or teeth. They win by learning, adapting, remembering. In a world where extinction is the rule, not the exception, the mammals are gamblers who learn the odds and keep playing anyway. And so, one generation at a time, the earth changes hands. Forests hum with the chatter of primates, oceans sing with the songs of whales, mountains echo with the trumpets of elephants and the howls of wolves. The world, once ruled by monsters, now belongs to thinkers. But evolution is never satisfied. Somewhere in the shifting forests of East Africa, a few apes make a strange decision. They begin to leave the trees, and they stand taller, balance awkwardly on 2 feet, and start walking. It's a small gesture, one that no one notices at the time, but it will change everything. Hands that once clutched branches are now free to carry, to throw, to create. Eyes rise above the grass, watching horizons, and brains, hungry and restless, begin to grow. The mammals have conquered the world, but one lineage in particular is about to rewrite it. The story of humanity is stirring beneath the leaves. The earth has survived fire, ice, and impact. Now it's about to face something new. A creature that won't just adapt to its world, it will reshape it. Up in the green, tangled cathedrals of the ancient forests, the story of life takes a curious turn. The ocean's drama and the dinosaurs' thunder have faded into memory. Now the world hums softly, a slower rhythm where survival is less about size or armor and more about agility, awareness, and connection. It's in this new quiet that evolution begins tinkering again, sketching rough drafts of what will one day look a lot like us. Picture it. A humid canopy stretching as far as the horizon, dripping with rain, buzzing with insects and alive with movement. Every branch is a road, every vine a bridge, every leaf a hiding place or a meal. In these trees, the next great experiment begins in the primates. They're not impressive at first glance, small, twitchy, perpetually half alert. But inside those small skulls, something extraordinary is starting to stir. They learn to live where few others can, in a 3-dimensional world where danger and opportunity hang at every height. To move here, you need balance, precision, and hands that can hold on tight. So, evolution gives them a gift: flexible fingers and opposable thumbs. It's not just a tool, it's an idea. A hand that can grab, twist, hold, or throw will someday write poetry and light fires. But for now, it just grips a branch and hangs on for dear life. Vision sharpens next. In the dim light of the forest, color becomes useful. A ripe fruit stands out against green leaves. A snake's scales glint before it strikes. The eyes move to the front of the head, merging 2 views into one deep, stereoscopic picture. Suddenly these creatures can judge distance. And that changes everything. Now they can leap, not fall. They can plan, not guess. The brain grows a little larger, a little more connected. Awareness blooms quietly, like a candle lit in the dark. And with awareness comes trouble, because once you can think even just a little, you can also worry, plot, and cheat. You can remember who stole your food, who groomed you last, and who owes you a favor. Social life becomes a game of constant calculation. Friendships form, rivalries simmer, alliances shift like shadows in the leaves. It's the first board meeting of evolution. Part cooperation, part chaos. They groom each other, not just to remove bugs, but to build trust. A few strokes of fur can mean safety, belonging, or political advantage. The group matters, strength in numbers. Alone, a primate is dinner. Together they are a society in miniature. Hierarchies form. Some rule with aggression, others with charm. The forest hums with negotiation. Every chatter, screech, and gesture carries meaning, a vocabulary of survival. Time stretches on, forests grow, fall, and rise again. Different branches of the primate family tree begin to wander off on their own adventures. Lemurs drift to Madagascar and evolve into acrobats of the night. Monkeys spread through Asia, Africa, and the Americas, each adapting in their own eccentric ways. Some swing effortlessly through trees, others walk the forest floor like they own it. And somewhere in Africa, a few species begin to experiment with something new: curiosity. They peer down from branches and wonder what's on the ground. Maybe the trees are getting crowded, maybe the fruit's running scarce, or maybe, deep in their tiny brains, a strange pull toward change begins to whisper. They start spending more time on the forest floor, standing a little taller to see over grass or reach low-hanging fruit. Muscles shift. The spine straightens just enough. A new posture begins to take shape. Not fully upright, but not quite like anything before. It's awkward, unsteady, but full of potential. Their faces evolve too. Where other animals rely on growls or scents, primates begin experimenting with expression. A raised eyebrow, a baring of teeth, a soft cooing sound. These gestures become the building blocks of emotion. It's communication in motion, a way to say, "Don't hurt me," or "Come closer," or, in time, "I trust you." And beneath all of this, something profound is brewing. The brain, that hungry, energy-devouring organ, keeps expanding. Memory lengthens, problem-solving improves. Curiosity becomes not just useful, but irresistible. A stick isn't just a stick anymore, it's something that could knock down a piece of fruit or dig for grubs. In the branches of those ancient forests, the first inklings of tool use flicker to life. It's a subtle revolution. No one notices it happening. There are no fanfares, no witnesses, indeed just one primate figuring out that the world can be changed even in small ways. Every innovation, however tiny, adds a new layer to the great story of becoming. And yet life up here isn't easy. Predators stalk the shadows, food comes and goes, storms rip through the canopy without warning. To survive, they need each other, and they need to think ahead. Slowly, these traits, cooperation, planning, empathy, become survival tools as real as claws or teeth. Generations pass. Forests give way to open plains. The world is changing again, climate shifting, landscapes rearranging themselves like a restless painter. And so some primates descend for good. They begin walking further, standing taller, carrying food in their hands instead of their mouths. The trees no longer define their world. But even for those who stay behind, evolution's experiment has already succeeded. In them, the seeds of something remarkable have been planted, the ability to imagine, to dream of what's beyond the trees, to recognize themselves in the faintest sense as individuals within the vast living web. They still chatter and groom and steal each other's bananas. But in their laughter, yes, some even laugh, there's the ghost of something entirely new. Consciousness. Not fully formed, not even understood, but present, flickering. The first whisper of self-awareness. From here, the story could have ended 100 different ways. A shift in climate, a new predator, an unlucky storm, and the experiment might have closed forever. But it didn't. The primates adapted. They endured. They carried that spark forward, hand over hand, branch to branch, across the ages, because evolution doesn't care about perfection. It cares about persistence, about trying again and again until something strange and unexpected works. And up there in the canopy, in the eyes of a clever little creature peering through leaves, something did work. A new kind of mind was forming, playful, social, endlessly inquisitive. The forests were its cradle, the branches its first classrooms. And from that green world of whispers and laughter, the future was quietly taking shape. Soon, those curious creatures would climb down, look around, and never stop wondering. Somewhere under the blazing African sun, the story changes again. The trees have thinned, the air hums with heat and the dry breath of savannas. The forest dwellers who once swung through branches now stand on uncertain ground, blinking at a horizon that stretches far and wide. Something ancient and small stands upright, squints into the light, and takes a cautious step forward. This is not just another animal testing the edges of its world. This is the beginning of us. The first of these ground walkers were the Australopithecines, creatures halfway between ape and human, with long arms, short legs, and minds that were still figuring out how to think about thinking. They didn't invent fire or paint caves yet. They were simpler, but not simple. They walked upright, freeing their hands for other ambitions. Their world was dangerous. Lions, leopards, saber-toothed cats, and crocodiles waited for any mistake. But walking tall had its perks. They could see further, they could carry food, they could plan ahead. That, more than any tooth or bone, is what would change everything, the quiet invention of foresight. In time, evolution sharpened the experiment. Australopithecus gave way to Homo habilis. Handyman. And for the first time, hands began shaping the world. With sharp eyes and even sharper stones, they learned to crack bones open for marrow, slice meat, and chip tools from flint. These were no longer just scavengers picking at leftovers, they were creators. Imagine a group of Homo habilis huddled around a carcass, their tools glinting in the afternoon sun. They're small, barely 4 feet tall, but their brains hum with purpose. One chips a stone, another watches, learning through imitation. A concept is forming, the first faint spark of teaching, culture in its infancy. The world around them remains indifferent. Winds shift, rains come and go, predators stalk the plains. But these little creatures have something new: adaptability. Their brains are growing, their coordination improving, their curiosity relentless. And curiosity, once ignited, is evolution's favorite fuel. Generations pass. The plains grow drier. Forests recede even more. The world demands endurance, and evolution answers with a new design. Homo erectus, taller, stronger, with longer legs built for distance and lungs tuned for running. These early humans can cover miles without tiring, track prey for hours under the punishing sun, and coordinate their movements through shared understanding. They are, for the first time, hunters who chase instead of hide. The hunted have become the hunters, and somewhere along the way one of them learns to tame fire. It might have begun by accident, a spark struck from stone, a lightning-scorched tree still smouldering. But one of them stayed close instead of running away. They poked at it, fed it, watched it dance. Fire changed everything. It gave warmth at night, protection from predators, and cooked food that unlocked more energy, fueling bigger brains. It also brought something abstract: time. Around a fire, you could sit. You could share. You could remember. The flicker of flames became the flicker of thought. Now they could see in the dark, both literally and figuratively. Homo erectus spreads out from Africa, carrying their new invention with them, the first great travelers in the human saga. They cross rivers, deserts, and mountains, step by step, without knowing that they're rewriting the map of life. Fire follows them like a loyal companion, a small patch of light in a vast, cold world. They begin to build communities, loose at first, then more organized. The world of solitary survival gives way to cooperation. Some hunt, others gather. Some guard the young, others craft tools. Around the fire, communication deepens, not yet language as we know it, but sound and gesture woven into meaning. Grunts, clicks, and calls become shared understanding. Words are still a long way off, but the rhythm of conversation has begun. The mind learns to tell stories, even if the stories are made of gestures and eyes. There's food that way. Danger near the river. Follow me. In this simple sharing lies something extraordinary, the foundation of civilization. Over time, the software of humanity keeps updating. Homo heidelbergensis, Homo floresiensis, Homo neanderthalensis. Each a new version, each adapting to its corner of the earth. Some grow stocky and strong for the cold, others remain lean for the heat. They make spears, bury their dead, and paint with ochre. The line between animal and human blurs until it vanishes. And then, somewhere around 300,000 years ago, another kind of being steps into the story. Homo sapiens. That's us, you, me, the dreamers, the storytellers, the troublemakers. We inherit everything that came before, the curiosity of habilis, the endurance of erectus, the empathy of those who gathered around the fire. But something new blooms in our skulls. Imagination. We can see not only what is, but what could be. We start to dream. The world of early Homo sapiens is harsh. Ice sheets advance and retreat. Herds migrate, storms rage, and survival demands constant awareness. But humans adapt. They build better tools, sharper points, stronger shelters. They cooperate not just in the moment, but across generations, passing knowledge forward like a torch. You can almost picture it, a group of early humans crouched in the flickering firelight. One elder shows the young how to bind a stone to a stick. Another hums softly, perhaps without realizing they're inventing the first melody. Outside, the stars burn cold and patient, but inside, a different kind of fire glows, one that won't go out. These early humans begin to mark their world. Handprints appear on cave walls, silent signatures saying, "I was here." They carve bones, string beads, and wear them as decoration. Vanity, expression, identity, all awakening together. They're no longer surviving just to exist. They're starting to mean something. And with that meaning comes memory. They remember the hunt, the storm, the face of a friend. They begin to honor their dead, a small gesture that implies something profound. They understand absence. They know what it means to lose. That single realization separates them forever from everything that came before. This is the dawn of consciousness as we know it. Not just awareness, but reflection. They look at fire and wonder where it comes from. They look at the sky and wonder what's beyond. And in those questions, humanity takes root. But the story is far from finished. The world will still change. Ice will melt, rivers will shift, and whole species will vanish. Yet the humans remain, walking upright under an ancient sky, carrying the past within their bones and the future in their minds. The journey from ape to thinker was slow, messy, full of dead ends and detours. But somewhere in that long chain of chance and change, a spark caught and stayed lit. They learned to stand, then to think, then to wonder. And in that wondering, the universe, after billions of years of silence, finally began to hear its own story told aloud. By the time the first humans learned how to keep the fire alive, the world had become both home and horizon. The air was colder now, the ice age breathing frost across continents. Herds of mammoths roamed the plains, glaciers carved valleys, and the land itself seemed to shift under the weight of time. But humans, small, stubborn, endlessly curious, began to move. They followed the rivers first. Water meant food, shelter, and direction. A flowing stream could lead you somewhere warmer, somewhere better. Families packed what little they had. Stone tools, bundles of meat, glowing embers wrapped in bark, and walked. They didn't know where they were going, only that they could. From Africa, they spread like roots through the soil of the world, across the Sinai, through the deserts of Arabia, into Asia, and then north into Europe. Others drifted east, following coastlines, until one day they reached lands no human foot had ever touched. Islands, peninsulas, new worlds waiting under alien skies. No maps, no compass, no destination, just instinct and sky. They walked in groups of 20, maybe 30. Children slung over shoulders, elders carried when they could no longer walk. Fires were built at dusk, ashes buried at dawn. It wasn't a grand march, but a slow, uncertain crawl across thousands of miles, step by step, generation by generation. And with every step, the world changed them. The cold sculpted their bodies, the wind shaped their skin. Some grew pale in the northern lands where sunlight hid for half the year. Others grew lean and dark under equatorial suns. The human body, always practical, adjusted like clay in evolution's hands. But more than their bodies, it was their minds that evolved. When you move constantly, you learn to see differently, to remember landscapes, read stars, sense danger in silence. They learned the language of the earth itself, the curve of hills that hinted at water, the tracks of prey that whispered where to hunt next. The world became both enemy and teacher, and humans learned to listen. At night, under strange constellations, they began to talk, really talk. Around the campfire, stories were born. A flash of lightning became the anger of a god. The wind in the grass became the whisper of spirits. The first myths formed like smoke, soft, shifting, impossible to grasp. They weren't just entertainment, they were explanations, memory, and lore, all rolled into one. "Don't drink from that river," one would say, pointing to a dark current. "That's where the serpent lives." Maybe there was no serpent. Maybe there was just poison in the water. But the story worked, and it stayed. Myths, it turned out, were excellent survival tools. Firelight became the first classroom. The old taught the young how to knap flint, how to track gazelle, how to recognize safe plants by smell. Every skill was a story, every lesson a performance. The rhythm of teaching, of passing knowledge down the line, became part of what it meant to be human. And alongside skill came imagination. On cave walls across Europe and Asia, humans began to paint. Herds of bison charging across stone, antelope leaping mid-stride, hands pressed against rock like signatures. These weren't random doodles, they were memories, prayers, or perhaps attempts to speak to the unseen. When words couldn't capture it, art could. Deep in the caves of Lascaux and Chauvet, torchlight flickered across paintings that seemed to move. The artists mixed minerals with spit, blew pigment through hollow reeds, and filled the darkness with life. Each image was a promise. We were here. We saw this. We remember. Burial, too, became ritual. The dead were no longer left for scavengers. They were buried with care, sometimes with beads, sometimes with food, sometimes with tools for the next world. That quiet gesture of placing something beside a body spoke volumes. Humans had begun to dream of after. They didn't just live in the world anymore, they began to imagine one beyond it. Wanderers turned the earth into a library. Every campfire was a new chapter. In the sands of the Arabian Peninsula, they learned how to find water from watching the flight of birds. In the frozen plains of Siberia, they made clothes from fur and bone. On the coasts of Australia, they learned to fish with sharpened sticks and woven traps. Every lesson, every adaptation became another page in humanity's story. And though they didn't know it, They were knitting the continents together, one footprint at a time. Even when separated by mountains or seas, people everywhere began to do similar things. They decorated themselves with shells and ochre. They carved symbols into stone and bone. They sang, they danced, they mourned. These instincts, to express, to beautify, to connect, appeared everywhere like flowers sprouting after rain. Because survival alone wasn't enough anymore, they wanted meaning. They started to look up, not just to navigate, but to wonder. The moon became a companion, the stars, perhaps ancestors. They traced constellations into stories, hunters, beasts, lovers, creating the first cosmic maps. When thunder rolled across the plains, they felt awe. When the sun disappeared behind an eclipse, they felt fear. Both emotions came from the same place, the growing awareness that they were small, yet part of something vast. And with that awareness came belonging. For the first time, humans saw themselves not as separate from the world, but woven into it. The land, the sky, the fire, the hunt, everything was connected. They began to thank the animals they killed, to sing to the rivers they drank from. Gratitude became ritual, ritual became culture, and culture became the invisible thread that tied generations together. But this age wasn't without hardship. The journey was brutal. Children were lost, fires went out, whole groups vanished into storms, into hunger, into history's silence. Yet others pressed on, drawn by instinct, by hope, by the faint idea that somewhere, just over that next hill, things might be better. That willingness to keep moving, to trust what you can't see, became humanity's defining trait. Tens of thousands of years later, the descendants of those wanderers would populate every corner of the globe, from the icy tundra of Alaska to the rainforests of the Amazon, from the high plateaus of Tibet to the deserts of Arabia. But even then, even after spreading so far, they would all carry the same ancient rhythm inside them. The pulse of migration, the echo of firelight storytelling, the restless curiosity of their ancestors. It's easy to think of these people as primitive, but in truth they were pioneers. Explorers without maps, scientists without notebooks, poets without paper. Everything we are began with them, our creativity, our fear, our wonder. They looked at the same stars you see tonight. They listened to the same crackle of fire, and somewhere between those two things, or between warmth and mystery, humanity learned to dream. The Age of Wanderers wasn't just about movement, it was about awakening. The first realization that the world was vast, that stories could outlive people, and that curiosity was not a flaw, but a flame that would keep us walking, and walking, and walking. The Ice Age world was vast, cold, and eerily beautiful. Frozen plains stretched for miles under silver skies. Herds of mammoth and woolly rhinoceros trampled paths through frostbitten grass. And somewhere among the glaciers and caves, we were not alone. Long before we became the sole storytellers of this planet, other humans walked beside us, cousins born from the same ancient roots, shaped by different lands and different challenges. The most famous of them were the Neanderthals. They weren't the brutish cave dwellers old textbooks once claimed. Far from it. The Neanderthals were strong, yes, barrel-chested, muscular, with thick bones built to survive cold that would stop a modern human's heart in minutes. But behind those broad brows were minds capable of empathy, creativity, and something startlingly familiar, the urge to make meaning. They lived across Ice Age Europe and Western Asia, crafting tools with skill and precision. They knapped flint, carved spears, and used fire not just for warmth, but for artistry. Archaeologists have found pigments at their camps: ochre, manganese, red, and yellow. Evidence of body paint, decoration, and maybe even ritual. In one cave in Spain, long before modern humans arrived, Neanderthals painted red circles and lines on the walls. It's the first graffiti in history, not of animals or hunts, but symbols, signs that said, we were here, we thought, we dreamed. And then, somewhere further east, another branch of our family stirred, the Denisovans. We don't know what they looked like. Their fossils are so scarce that for years all we had was a fragment of a finger bone found in a Siberian cave. Yet from that sliver came a revelation. DNA that didn't match ours or the Neanderthals, but something in between. A third branch of humanity, ghost-like but real. They lived high in the mountains, maybe in the shadow of snow-capped peaks. When modern scientists study the genes of people in Tibet, they discovered something extraordinary, an ancient adaptation that helps their blood carry oxygen in thin air. It came from the Denisovans. Their legacy lives inside lungs that breathe at impossible altitudes. So picture the world then, not one species of human, but several. Neanderthals in Europe, Denisovans in Asia, Homo floresiensis, the so-called hobbits, on a distant island, tiny and clever and unbothered by extinction, just yet. Even Homo erectus still lingered in pockets, stubbornly holding on. For tens of thousands of years, the world wasn't a human story. It was a human chorus. And then into that chorus came us, Homo sapiens. We met our cousins not as conquerors at first, but as travelers. Along icy valleys and riverbanks, across forests and caves, we crossed paths. What happened next wasn't always war or peace. More often, it was something in between. A mix of cooperation, curiosity, competition, and occasionally affection, because we didn't just fight, we mingled. The evidence lives in our blood. Modern humans carry between 1 and 2% Neanderthal DNA. People from Asia and Oceania carry traces of Denisovans. Those aren't just distant genetic ghosts. They're living proof of encounters, alliances, shared fires, and children who blurred the lines between species. Imagine it. Two camps meeting on the edge of a frozen valley. Hunters eyeing each other warily. One group slightly taller, the other broader. The same fear, the same hunger, the same spark of recognition that you are like me, but not quite. Perhaps they traded tools or meat or gestures of goodwill. Perhaps they fell in love. Perhaps they taught each other songs. For a while, the world held room for all of us. But nature is not sentimental. Climate changed, food grew scarce, and slow shifts turned survival into a test no one could cheat. The ice thickened, the plains shrank, and the balance tilted toward one species, ours. The Neanderthals held on longer than most imagine. They adapted, hunted, raised their children in caves warmed by firelight. They buried their dead with care, sometimes with flowers. They tended to the sick and elderly, proof of compassion older than civilization itself. In the Shanidar cave of Iraq, archaeologists found the remains of a Neanderthal who'd lost an arm and suffered severe injuries, but lived for years afterward. Someone had cared for him, fed him, protected him. That single skeleton rewrote what we thought we knew about our kin. They weren't savages, they were people. And yet one by one the fires went out. Around 40,000 years ago, the Neanderthals disappeared. No great battle, no sudden catastrophe, just a slow fading. A combination of factors, climate, competition, and perhaps absorption. Their last strongholds were in the caves of Gibraltar, where they clung to life as the world changed around them. Then they were gone. But not really gone. When geneticists mapped the modern human genome, the Neanderthals stirred again, not as fossils, but as echoes within us, Pieces of their code still live in our immune systems, in our skin, even in how some of us process sunlight. Their DNA whispers through every cell, a memory written in flesh. The Denisovans, too, though vanished, left their mark. The ability to thrive at high altitudes, a gift passed down to the living. Even the hobbits of Flores and the mysterious humans of Luzon, tiny, isolated and strange, remind us that we were once part of something broader, a family of experimenters shaped by time and geography. What happened to them wasn't a murder mystery. It was entropy, evolution's quiet arithmetic. Some survived by joining us, others vanished, leaving only bones and myths. And humanity, as we know it, inherited the earth. But not alone. We carry them within us in stories we never meant to tell. Ancient legends of giants and forest spirits, of beings who looked human but not quite. Maybe those aren't pure invention. Maybe they're genetic memories translated into folklore, the last echo of cousins who shared our fire long ago. In a sense, they never left. They breathe in us, walk in us, dream in us. So the next time someone calls humans unique, remember that we are not a single spark, but a flame made of many wicks, Neanderthal, Denisovan, Sapiens, all burning together in one long, improbable light. We like to think of ourselves as the final version, the finished draft. But that's a comforting illusion. Evolution doesn't finish anything, it just keeps revising. We're simply the latest addition in a long collaborative story, one written by countless hands, some long vanished but never forgotten. And if the Neanderthals could see us now, our cities, our satellites, our glowing screens, maybe they'd recognize something familiar in the flicker of our eyes. The same hunger to understand, the same love of fire. The Ice Age may have ended, but its legacy still moves through our veins. The cousins are gone, but their shadows stretch far beyond extinction. Not in bone, not in legend, but in us. Then something changed. No one knows exactly when or why, but somewhere between 70,000 and 40,000 years ago, the human mind crossed an invisible threshold. For millions of years, evolution had shaped bones, muscles, and reflexes, but now, for the first time, it reshaped thought itself. And the world would never be the same. Before this shift, humans were clever animals, resourceful, coordinated, capable of survival. But afterward, they became something else entirely. Dreamers, planners, storytellers. The change wasn't in the hands that made tools, but in the minds that imagined them. Archaeologists call this era the Great Leap Forward. It wasn't one single leap, really. It was 1,000 small steps taken in many corners of the world at once, all converging towards something miraculous, the birth of imagination. Language, for instance, was no longer a series of grunts and gestures. It blossomed into something fluid, layered, and symbolic. Words could now describe things that weren't physically there. You could talk about the past, plan the future, or tell a lie. You could speak of spirits and gods, or warn someone about a predator you'd seen days before. With language, thought could move beyond the moment. Memory became portable. Knowledge could travel from one mind to another across generations. And with that came stories. Imagine a campfire on the plains of Africa, sparks rising into the night. Around it, a circle of humans, men, women, children, huddled close. One of them, perhaps an elder, begins to speak. The others fall silent. The story might be about how the first hunter found fire, or how the moon was trapped and freed, or why the lion's eyes glow in the dark. It doesn't matter if it's true. What matters is that it means something. That was the beginning of myth. And myth was the software that would run the new human brain. It taught cooperation, morality, belonging. It bound individuals into tribes and tribes into cultures. It turned survival into community, and community into civilization. But the great leap forward wasn't just about stories, it was about symbols everywhere: paint, beads, carvings, music. The earliest known flutes were made from bird bones and mammoth ivory, some more than 40,000 years old. The people who made them didn't need music to survive. They made it because they wanted to, because something inside them craved beauty. That's when humanity began to drift from necessity into imagination. Take the caves of Lascaux, deep in southern France. Inside, in chambers untouched for millennia, the walls come alive with color. Bison charging, horses galloping, herds moving across imagined plains. The artists used charcoal and ochre, blowing pigment through hollow bones to create delicate shading. They painted by torchlight, surrounded by flickering shadows. No one knows what those paintings were for. Ritual, record, prayer, perhaps all of them at once. But the act itself mattered. Humans were no longer just reacting to the world, they were interpreting it. They saw not just an animal, but a symbol, not just a mountain, but a mystery. And that's the essence of this leap. Consciousness turning inward. The mind became its own frontier. With that came complexity. Tools more specialized, weapons more efficient, ornaments more intricate. Shell beads were traded across vast distances, proof that humans were beginning to connect, not just within tribes, but between them. Long before money, there was trade, and long before trade, there was trust. That trust was built in large part through gossip. It might sound trivial, but gossip, talking about others, was one of the first tools of social survival. When groups grew beyond a few dozen people, no one could keep track of everyone's behavior. Who was trustworthy? Who was selfish? Who broke the rules? Gossip allowed early humans to police reputation without needing constant vigilance. In that sense, language evolved as much for social control as for storytelling. It became the glue that held expanding groups together. And so, with tongues wagging and stories spreading, humanity's social web grew denser. People began to specialize. Some hunted, others gathered, some carved or sang or healed. Culture, something no animal truly possesses, emerged not from hunger, but from imagination. Firelight turned into theater. Hunting tools became art objects. The mind became playground, weapon, and refuge all at once. You can trace that shift even in the artifacts left behind. A hand axe is practical, a carved ivory figurine is philosophical. One is survival, the other is self-expression. The famous Lion Man of Hohenstein-Stadel, a 40,000-year-old sculpture combining human and lion features, stands as proof that humans were beginning to dream of things that didn't exist. That single object tells an entire story of transformation. The artist who carved it wasn't just shaping ivory, they were shaping the idea of imagination itself. The ability to see something unseen, to give form to the invisible, to make gods from clay and spirits from air. The moment that happened, humanity stopped being just a species and became an idea. We began to imagine not just tools and weapons, but identities, hierarchies, and beliefs. We invented fashion, ritual, rhythm, and color. We painted our faces, braided our hair, wore teeth and shells, not for use but for beauty. The body itself became a canvas for meaning, and everywhere humans went, that imagination followed. When they migrated out of Africa into Asia and Europe, they carried not just spears and skins, but symbols, a shared language of meaning that transcended place, the same impulse to decorate, to sing, to dream, to make sense of a vast and dangerous world by turning it into story. It was this mental revolution that gave humans an advantage no other creature could match. Strength fades, claws and teeth are limited. But imagination? Imagination makes tools sharper than bone, communities stronger than muscle, and futures longer than memory. Even today, that same leap hums beneath the surface of everything we do. When a child invents an imaginary friend, when a musician writes a melody, when a scientist dreams of something no one has seen, that's the echo of the same spark that once lit up a cave wall 40,000 years ago. It's the quiet inheritance of those first dreamers, and perhaps that's why humans can never quite stop creating. We are wired to invent, to decorate, to tell ourselves stories of who we are and who we might be. It's what separates us not just from other animals, but from our own past. In the Great Leap Forward, humanity didn't gain new muscles or sharper teeth. We gained the ability to look at the world and say, what if? And from that question came everything: art, faith, civilization, love, grief, and the restless hum of curiosity that still drives us today. From mammoths painted on stone to lullabies whispered to infants, the spark remains the same. The same hands that once traced bison in flickering torchlight now type symphonies into glowing screens. The same voice that told myths by fire now narrates the story of the stars. Because the Great Leap Forward never really ended, it began the moment a mind realized it could dream. And it continues every time one of us dares to imagine something new. Someone, somewhere, planted a seed. Maybe it wasn't planned. Maybe it was just a handful of wild grass tossed aside after a meal, left to rot in the dirt. But when that grass grew again, taller, thicker, golden, it changed everything. That single act, almost accidental, would transform the rhythm of the world. For millions of years, humans had wandered, chasing herds, following seasons, sleeping under skies that never looked the same twice. They were nomads, tuned to movement, their lives written in footprints and campfires. But with that first seed, the story began to slow down. This was the dawn of agriculture. It didn't happen overnight. It began quietly, like most revolutions do. Across scattered pockets of the globe, Mesopotamia, the Nile Valley, the Indus River, the Yellow River Basin, people started to notice patterns. They saw that certain plants grew better near rivers, that seeds scattered after harvest sprouted again next season. Slowly, instinct turned into intention. Wild grains like barley and wheat became the first to be cultivated. Humans began to stay in one place long enough to watch them grow. For the first time, home wasn't where the fire was, it was where the crops were. It sounds simple, even peaceful, but this shift was monumental. Hunting and gathering had tied people to the pulse of nature, but farming tied nature to the will of people, and that was both genius and disaster. Farming changed time itself. Days became measured by sunlight, months by planting and harvest. The cycle of survival now had a schedule. The wild unpredictability of the world was replaced by something new, routine. It was the beginning of waiting, waiting for rain, waiting for ripening, waiting for the moment to reap what had been sown. And while humans waited, they began to build. The first villages appeared, small clusters of huts surrounded by fields of grain. Places like Jericho and Çatalhöyük, older than pyramids, rose from the soil like experiments in permanence. Life was still fragile, but it was now rooted. Roots, literal and social, began to form. But roots also trap you. With stability came ownership. With ownership came boundaries. And with boundaries came arguments. For the first time in human history, there were neighbors. And with them, all the petty dramas of civilization, disputes over water, over land, over whose goats had wandered where. The human story, once a vast tale of movement and discovery, narrowed into a smaller, more domestic world. The campfire became a kitchen, the open plain became a field. Yet in those small, fenced-in lives, the seeds of civilization took hold. The ability to store food meant that not everyone had to hunt or gather anymore. Some people could specialize, becoming tool makers, potters, builders, priests. Society began to layer itself like sediment on a riverbed. And with food, surpluses came something even stranger: leisure. People had time to think, to plan, to imagine beyond the next meal. They built shrines, decorated walls, told more elaborate stories. Religion began to take root alongside the crops. The cycle of sowing and reaping became divine. Gods of rain, fertility, and harvest rose in every culture. The soil wasn't just a source of life, it became sacred. But there was a darker side too. Farming was hard, backbreaking, time-consuming. A bad season could starve an entire settlement. The security it promised came with chains of labor, hierarchy, and control. Once people owned land, they had to defend it. Once they had possessions, they had to protect them. Freedom was traded for predictability. Some anthropologists even argue that wheat domesticated us, not the other way around. Think about it. Humans began to live their lives according to the needs of plants. Wake up early till the soil, irrigate the fields, harvest on time, store the grain, repeat. The crop dictated the rhythm. Humans became caretakers, servants to their own creation. And so, while evolution slowed, society accelerated. Bodies changed little, but minds began to warp around new concepts: planning, accounting, inheritance, law. Numbers appeared not as abstract ideas, but as tallies of grain. Writing was born from ledgers, not literature. Civilization sprouted not from philosophy, but from the logistics of storage. The first cities grew from this arithmetic of survival. Uruk in Mesopotamia, Mohenjo-Daro in the Indus Valley, Thebes along the Nile, clusters of stone and mud brick that turned collective labor into collective power. Walls rose. So did temples. And with them came hierarchy. Some ruled, others worked. Some prayed, others obeyed. The once egalitarian tribes of hunter-gatherers hardened into classes. Power began to concentrate, first in priests, then in kings. And yet, beneath the layers of politics and stone, that first seed still whispered. It whispered of a bargain made long ago. In exchange for abundance, humanity would surrender freedom. There was no going back. Even those who tried, nomadic tribes, pastoral wanderers, found themselves surrounded by walls, fields, and empires. The wild world was shrinking, but civilization, for all its flaws, created new wonders. Pottery, metalwork, irrigation canals, trade routes, all born from the simple need to feed a village. People who had once wandered barefoot across the savannah now built monuments that touched the sky. The rhythm of the hunt had become the rhythm of the plough. And yet, under that rhythm, a deeper pattern persisted, the old human restlessness. The same curiosity that had driven early wanderers across continents now drove inventors to make the plough sharper, the wheel faster, the cities bigger. Agriculture wasn't just about plants, it was about control. Humans had learned to bend the wild world to their will, to take the randomness of nature and make it predictable. But every act of control breeds consequence. So while fields grew and granaries filled, so did conflict. War was born not from scarcity, but from surplus. Armies didn't march for survival, they marched for grain, for land, for dominance. And somewhere deep down, humanity began to long for something it had lost. The wind on the open plains, the thrill of the hunt, the sound of rain unmeasured by crops or calendars. But it was too late. The seed had already grown into the tree of civilization, and its roots ran deep. What began as an experiment in survival had become the foundation of everything. Cities, writing, religion, power, progress. Every skyscraper, every law, every story of empire can trace its lineage back to that first handful of soil. When someone, somewhere, bent down and planted a seed, not knowing that in doing so, they were also planting the future. We take the wild and make it ours because that's what humans do, and in return, it makes us something new. Civilization didn't arrive with fanfare. It crept in quietly, one brick, one prayer, one marketplace at a time. The small farming villages that had once clung to riverbanks began to swell. Fields spread wider, walls went higher, and soon people were no longer just surviving. They were building something bigger than themselves. The age of the village was ending. The age of the city had begun. At first, cities were nothing more than fortified granaries, places to store the harvests safely from raiders, rats, and misfortune. But once you had walls, you needed guards. Once you had guards, you needed leadership. And once you had leadership, you had power. That's how cities like Uruk, Memphis, and Babylon began to hum. Great clusters of stone and sweat, threaded through with humanity's newest obsession, organization. Inside those walls, life pulsed differently. The air buzzed with the sound of barter, hammers, and livestock. Streets grew crowded with people who no longer had to till the soil. Potters, smiths, scribes, merchants, priests. For the first time in history, human effort began to specialize, like organs forming in a single living body. Trade became its bloodstream. Surplus grain turned into currency, obsidian and copper, crossed deserts on camel caravans, and riverboats carried lapis lazuli and spices between distant lands. The world began to stitch itself together with commerce, a web of human ambition spun from clay tablets and weary feet. But where there's trade, there's uncertainty. The same rivers that fed crops could flood and destroy them. The same sun that ripened wheat could scorch it to ash. People needed explanations and reassurance. So they looked upward. Out of awe, fear, and confusion, gods were born. The sky gods, the river gods, the storm gods, the god of grain, and the goddess of fertility. Each one a story wrapped around the mysteries of survival. The Sumerians saw divinity in the Tigris and Euphrates. The Egyptians worshipped the sun as both father and judge. Every civilization spoke to the world as if it were listening. Temples rose at the heart of cities, not just as places of worship, but as the beating centers of society. Priests became record keepers, astronomers, and early scientists. Religion wasn't just faith, it was the first bureaucracy, and it worked. Religion united people. It explained the unexplainable. It made the harvest sacred and the hierarchy divine. When kings appeared, they claimed not just the right to rule, but the cosmic right, ordained by heaven, justified by myth. Every empire began as a story, and those who told the story controlled the world. In Sumer, they wrote those stories on clay tablets, pressing reed styluses into wet earth. It was messy, but it worked. Cuneiform, and the world's first writing system, turned spoken words into permanent memory. With writing, civilization unlocked a superpower, time travel. Knowledge could now outlive the knower. Laws could be recorded, trade agreements formalized, prayers preserved, and taxes tracked. The past no longer vanished with the storyteller. It became clay, stone, ink. And with that, history began. But written memory came at a cost. Words could bind, but also command. Bureaucracy grew like a vine through every temple and palace, entangling life in records and decrees. If agriculture was the seed of civilization, writing was its nervous system, keeping everything connected for better or worse. And as words spread, so did ambition. Empires rose like mirages. Akkad, Egypt, the Hittites, the Shang. Rulers craved immortality, not through bloodlines, but through monuments. They built ziggurats that touched the clouds, pyramids that defied time, and statues that stared across centuries with stone eyes that refused to blink. For the first time, humans began shaping the world to remember them. They invented gods to explain creation, and built cities to rival it. In these early civilizations, mythology and architecture danced together. Every brick had meaning, every ritual a purpose. Flood myths, sun gods, creation tales, all attempts to weave chaos into order. The human mind, overwhelmed by its own success, reached for stories to make sense of it all. Because civilization was loud, the silence of the wild had been replaced by noise, the clang of metal, the chatter of markets, the cries of infants and livestock, the thud of hammers and sandals against stone. People had never lived so close together, and it changed everything. Privacy vanished, disease spread, but so did ideas. A potter's trick could travel hundreds of miles. A melody hummed by one shepherd might become a hymn in another land. Humanity had become a network, buzzing and sprawling, a hive of invention. And from that noise came creativity. Art blossomed on pottery, on temple walls, on the faces of statues. Music became ritual. Dance became prayer. Stories became tools. Teaching, warning, entertaining. Every civilization told the same tales in different tongues of creation, destruction, love, and death. And beneath it all, a new truth was forming, that humans weren't just surviving anymore. They were expressing. The Stone Age melted into the Bronze Age, and bronze itself became the symbol of progress. For the first time, humans could shape metal, not just stone. Swords, plows, and sculptures all gleamed with the same dull shine of ambition. Bronze turned power into permanence, but progress is a restless thing. It doesn't stop when it should. Trade routes expanded, cities swelled, and the balance that had once tied people to nature began to fray. Forests fell, rivers were dammed. The earth, once vast and wild, began to feel smaller, tamed yet trembling. The Iron Age followed harder, sharper, more ambitious. Weapons improved, empires clashed. The world's hum grew louder, and beneath it all, humanity's collective heartbeat quickened. Yet through all the chaos, people still looked up at the stars and wondered why. Why the floods came, why the sun set, why humans, small, fragile, noisy, had managed to carve meaning into stone. And every temple, every scroll, every whispered prayer was an answer to that question. We built gods to explain the storm. We built cities to outlast it, so that when the dust of our empires settled, something would still be left to remember. By now, evolution had little left to do. Nature had handed the tools to humanity, and humanity had decided to remake the world. The hunter had become the builder, the wanderer had become the dreamer, and Earth, once quiet and wild, now sang with the clamor of civilization, messy, brilliant, divine, and doomed in equal measure. Because once humans learned how to build, they also learned how to believe. And belief, as history would soon show, could move mountains or bury them. The world has grown louder, busier, and infinitely more complicated. But beneath the clatter of trade routes and temple bells, something new begins to stir. A question. Not whispered to gods this time, but to the world itself. What is this place? The age of curiosity doesn't arrive in a single year or kingdom. It grows slowly, like a spark beneath kindling, one mind at a time. Somewhere a sailor stares at the horizon and wonders what lies beyond. Somewhere else a scholar peers into the night sky and dares to imagine that those bright pinpricks are not holes in a celestial curtain, but suns, like ours. For millennia, humans had been telling stories to explain the world. Now they start to test them. The first scientists don't look like scientists. They're alchemists, monks, philosophers, and heretics, all chasing truths no one asked them to find. They stir mixtures in flasks, grind powders, and chart the heavens with trembling hands. Most of what they do is wrong, but every mistake, every explosion, every late-night scribble brings the world one breath closer to understanding itself. The age of curiosity begins with daring and an unsettling willingness to be wrong. Sailors are among the first to act on it. For thousands of years, humanity had hugged the shore, too afraid to lose sight of land. Then, with compasses in hand and desperation in their hearts, they push beyond the horizon. Ships cross oceans and return with impossible news of new continents, strange stars, spices that smell like heaven, and people who rewrite what human even means. The map of the world expands with every voyage, and so does the human mind. But curiosity is never pure. It comes tangled with greed, conquest, and the arrogance of discovery. The same voyages that bring knowledge also bring empire. The world becomes both larger and smaller, vast in its reach, but suddenly within grasp. Back home, thinkers peer in opposite directions, some through telescopes, others through microscopes. Both find universes waiting for them. In Italy, Galileo turns his telescope to the sky and sees moons circling Jupiter, a scandalous revelation in a world that insists Earth sits proudly at the center of everything. His findings shake the heavens themselves, and he pays for it in silence, forced to mutter the truth under his breath. Meanwhile, on another front, Antony van Leeuwenhoek squints through glass at a drop of water and discovers a cosmos teeming with invisible life. Creatures so small, so strange, they might as well be aliens. He calls them animalcules. The rest of the world calls them impossible. The macro and the micro, both unfolding at once. Humanity, for the first time, realizes it exists between two infinities. Science and superstition begin their eternal duel, though it's less a war than a dance. The two spin around each other through centuries, sometimes clashing, sometimes embracing, often indistinguishable. A physician might still consult the stars. A priest might study anatomy. A magician might discover chemistry by accident. The human mind is learning to stand on its own, even as it leans on old myths for balance. Printing presses hum, ideas spread faster than armies, and a new word enters the human vocabulary: revolution. Knowledge becomes contagious. One thinker's heresy becomes another's foundation. Newton builds on Galileo. Darwin will one day build on countless nameless naturalists who dared to sketch beetles and birds. The human story becomes a chain of borrowed sparks. Ideas passed hand to hand through time, lighting the way forward. Empires, meanwhile, rise on the promise of progress. They chart seas, build machines, and plant flags. But under all the pomp and conquest lies the same question that started this age: how does it all work? The Renaissance bleeds into the Enlightenment, and reason becomes fashionable. Coffee replaces ale as the intellectual drink of choice, and conversation becomes revolution, disguised as civility. Men and women debate gravity, liberty, and the soul in smoky rooms while quills scratch furiously in candlelight. The world is being redefined, not by kings or gods, but by curiosity. Of course, the cost of knowledge is never small. The same discoveries that bring wonder also bring destruction. Gunpowder, steam, the mechanization of labor. Curiosity feeds both invention and industry, often without asking whether it should. Machines roar to life, devouring coal and coughing up progress. The Industrial Revolution transforms quiet towns into sprawling cities. Humanity, once in rhythm with sunrise and harvest, now lives by the clock and the whistle. Night no longer means rest, only a different kind of work. And yet, amid the smoke and soot, the questions keep coming. What is electricity? What is disease? What makes the stars burn? The answers arrive in bursts. Each one another step away from superstition and another step toward control. Pasteur tames bacteria. Faraday bends lightning. Darwin quietly drops the most unsettling idea of all, that humans, noble and proud, are cousins to every living creature on Earth. For centuries, religion had told us we were made apart from nature. Evolution whispers that we are made of it. It's a scandalous thought, but a freeing one too, because if humanity evolved once, then perhaps it's still evolving now. Not just in body, but in mind. By the time telescopes reach deep space and microscopes peer into cells, the boundaries of reality itself begin to blur. Atoms, galaxies, DNA, each discovery reveals both the simplicity and strangeness of existence. The cosmos turns out to be both infinite and personal, as if designed to be explored. Curiosity, once a luxury, becomes survival. The human world is now too big, too complex, to run on tradition alone. We build universities, libraries, laboratories, temples not to gods but to questions. Even the old faiths adapt. Where once they preached obedience, now they grapple with understanding. The divine becomes not a being on a throne, but a mystery at the edge of perception. Through it all, curiosity remains the quiet pulse of the species. It drives the same restless energy that once sent our ancestors across continents. Now it sends probes across planets. Humanity's obsession with the unknown hasn't changed, only the tools have. Ships become rockets, maps become models of the universe, campfires become computers. And yet, despite all the data and diagrams, one truth endures. The more we learn, the stranger the world becomes. Every answer opens another door, another why, another what if. Empires fade, inventions rust, but curiosity, that ancient, inconvenient spark, burns on. It is evolution's most persistent trait, the one adaptation that never stops adapting. And somewhere between microscope slides and distant stars, humanity begins to realize we are not finished. We are still becoming, just differently now. You stand at the quiet edge of time, where the past hums beneath your skin and the future waits just out of sight. Everything that has ever lived, crawled or dreamed has somehow conspired to bring you here. The trilobite scuttling along an ancient seabed, the fish that first tasted air, the primate swinging through a sunlit forest. All of them are still inside you, like faint echoes resonating through bone and blood. The air around you hums with the rhythm of inheritance. Every heartbeat is a continuation of something unimaginably old. You are not separate from the story. You are the story, written in the same language as stars and dust. Somewhere, billions of years ago, a cell divided and refused to stop. Somewhere else, a creature lifted its head and saw the horizon and wondered what might lie beyond it. Each of those moments stacked upon the next, layering chance upon persistence, until one day a small creature began to think about thinking, and the world shifted forever. Now here you are, made of atoms, once forged in ancient suns, carrying a brain powerful enough to ask where those suns went. You are evolution's memory and its ongoing experiment. The world around you hums differently now. No longer ruled by claws or scales, it's shaped by circuits, satellites, and silent data streaming through invisible waves. The modern jungle is digital, but the instincts are the same. We still seek warmth, shelter, connection. We still chase patterns in the dark, hoping to understand the vastness that surrounds us. Somewhere, a scientist peers into a telescope and catches light that left a galaxy before the first humans ever drew on cave walls. Somewhere else, another scientist maps the human genome, uncovering ancestral stories buried deep within our cells. These acts are no different from lighting the first fire. They are sparks of curiosity, flaring against the endless dark. Evolution has changed form. It's no longer about teeth or tails, it's about thought. We adapt through technology, through ideas, through the way we shape the world instead of letting it shape us. But this too comes with questions. Are we still part of nature, or have we become something new? Are we improving the story, or just writing faster than we can read? Close your eyes and imagine the earth turning beneath you. The continents drifted apart, found balance, and now carry billions of humans, each one a spark of the same long-burning flame. From one small group wandering the African plains to a species that has touched the moon, it feels like a miracle. But miracles are just persistence, disguised as wonder. We've built towers that scrape the clouds, machines that whisper across galaxies, and stories that bind billions together. And yet, beneath all that noise, the oldest rhythm still beats quietly. The heartbeat of life continuing, generation to generation. The same heartbeat that pulsed in fish, in reptiles, in small nocturnal mammals who once watched the dinosaurs vanish. It's strange, isn't it? We've learned to split atoms, clone cells, and simulate universes, but we still look up at the stars and feel small. We still seek meaning in the silence. Perhaps that's what evolution has always been building toward, not perfection, but awareness. The ability to feel awe. The story of life has never been a straight line. It's a spiral, a pattern, repeating, echoing, evolving. What was once instinct becomes thought. What was once survival becomes philosophy. The trilobite's crawl becomes the astronaut's step. And through it all, the same curiosity glows faintly, like an ember that refuses to go out. That ember burns in every child who asks why, in every artist who paints what they dream, in every scientist who stays awake at night, chasing a question that might never be answered. Evolution, it seems, has turned inward, no longer sculpting bodies but minds, no longer testing who is strongest, but who can imagine something more. Still, the echoes of our origins remain. In the hush of the ocean, we remember where we came from. In the wind, we hear the breath of ancient forests. In the warmth of another's hand, we sense the same comfort our ancestors sought in firelight. The universe is not finished speaking, it speaks through us. Sometimes, late at night, when the world quiets and the hum of electricity fades, you can almost hear it, the slow heartbeat of the planet beneath your feet. It's easy to forget that we're part of something this vast. Easy to think of ourselves as separate, superior, isolated. But we are not outside of nature, we are its continuation. We are the descendants of stardust, the inheritors of oceans, the latest verse in a poem billions of years in the making. The next chapter has already begun. Artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, space exploration, each one is another step in the grand experiment. We are reshaping evolution itself, tinkering with the code that once shaped us blindly. Perhaps one day, another being will look back on us as we look upon the trilobites and dinosaurs, strange, fascinating, imperfect ancestors who built the path forward. And maybe, when they do, they'll understand something we're only beginning to glimpse, that intelligence is not the end of evolution, but its newest form of curiosity. You can feel the story folding back on itself now, circling quietly to where it began. From the chaos of creation to the complexity of consciousness, every step has been both an accident and an inevitability. Evolution is patient. It doesn't hurry. It doesn't need to. It simply tries again and again until something beautiful happens. And in you, something beautiful has. You are made of stories, the stories of cells, of ancestors, of ancient light, the stories of failures and triumphs, of creatures who dared to change. The miracle isn't that you survived all this, it's that you remember, you wonder, you dream. So tonight, as you drift towards sleep, imagine yourself standing on that endless timeline. Behind you stretch the shadows of oceans and forests, of extinct giants and silent stars. Ahead of you, possibility, unwritten pages. The wind outside might sound like nothing more than a whisper, but it's the same wind that once rippled through primordial seas. The same breath that filled the lungs of the first creature to walk on land. The same air that carried the laughter of ancient tribes beneath the stars. You are not just alive in this story, you are alive because of it. And as your eyes grow heavy, remember this: evolution never really ended. It continues in every idea, every act of kindness, every question asked into the night. It lives in you, in me, in the quiet hum of the world turning toward tomorrow. Because the miracle of life was never just about survival. It was about curiosity, our oldest, truest inheritance. And it's still glowing softly in you